based upon advocacy or whether it was based upon because we heard from the jury foreman after the fact and other jurors whether they were just smitten with Jodi Arias based upon her look and based upon, her sex appeal, so to speak. So it's a tough case. A lot of these tough cases are. But, look, at the end of the day, she didn't get the death penalty, and I think certainly they deserve credit for that.
Well, experienced lawyers, pardon me, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a two-parter. I had Dwayne Cates, an attorney from Phoenix. He thinks that they shouldn't have went to the death penalty again. Reason being, it wasn't just like one held out or maybe two. He said the fact that there were 4 holdouts, that this is a waste of taxpayer dollars. She's going to die in jail. A, do you agree with that point? And B, do you think they will convict a girl? Because, as you know, I think there's been less than maybe 20 that have been on death row.
Well, first of all, I agree that they should not be spending more money on this retrial on death. It's a waste of time. This woman is ruined. She's never going to be free again. She's never going to see daylight. I see nothing really being achieved other than I think the prosecutor had a big ego. I think he was devastated that he was on TV and people wanted his autograph and he didn't get the death penalty. And I think that fueled part of this. Facing life without the possibility of parole is a pretty grim way to look in the future. And she would be very duly punished, I'll tell you, if she's guilty of this thing, the way the jury said she was. I didn't see the entire case. But it sounded like a carefully premeditated, carefully thought out, vicious killing with a lot of efforts to cover it up. I don't think they should spend this money on a retrial on death. I totally agree with him. I'm against the death penalty, so I'm a biased person. I think the death penalty is very arbitrarily and unevenly imposed. You can have a serial killer in one state get life. You can have a young person with no criminal record in another state gets death, and it's done very arbitrarily. They're often wrong. Look at Barry Scheck and the Innocence Project, with the kind of great work they've done, showing that people who get the death penalty often are innocent. Mistakes are made, and you can't afford to make mistakes. So I don't think the death penalty really accomplishes much. It doesn't seem to deter crime. Every study seems to show that. So I'm against their retrying her. I really am. What was the other question, Jordan?
The other question was...
Let me respond to that before Tom references your other question. And this just goes to show that good minds could disagree. Now, here's the point. The point is that, it's not that I'm a proponent of the death penalty. I am a big proponent of justice. And my issue, and you raised the issue about what, Mr. Cates said, and he was making this case a referendum on the death penalty itself. And what my view of the world is that each state has a governor and elected legislature, and they decide what the policies of that state are. I mean, we know about federalism. This is not a political science discussion. But we have a president in federal, and then we have various states, there are 50, who elect their people. Now, in New York, we don't have the death penalty. In many other jurisdictions throughout the country, you do. I believe it's 32, at least, out of the 50 that have the death penalty. And so the decision about the death penalty, as, opposed or unopposed as I may be, is left to the local representatives in the states throughout the country. Now, having said that, in this particular case, you have to understand, and I say that not you, but just in general, that there's a victim here. And while the death penalty, according to Mr. Cates, is making a referendum about the death penalty, this case is about Jodi Arias and what she deserves. And there's a family there, and that family is Travis Alexander. And in this case, unlike many, many other death penalty cases, which I absolutely agree, we have a wonderful Innocence Project, that Innocence Project having fabulous lawyers who are able to get DNA and determine that someone's not guilty, that there's evidence that would suggest that there's someone else. The death penalty is so final, you can't reverse it. But you know what? That's not this case. In this case, there's compelling evidence establishing what she did. And based upon that, I think the prosecutor, whether he personally, Juan Martinez, and I don't know, I haven't spoken to him, whether he personally supports or opposes the death penalty, he has two obligations. One, to carry out the law within his jurisdiction of Arizona, and the death penalty is the law there. Number two, the obligation is to deal with the family. And what does the family think about justice? Now, I'm not suggesting the family should dictate to the district attorney what they should do, but I am suggesting that the family should have a lot of input in terms of what does happen, because he's an elected official. And as an elected official, he needs to listen to what the family's wishes are. And therefore, based upon the heinous nature of this crime, based upon the reality that she did it, okay? She did it. And that's pretty compellingly clear. I think that it's up to the local officials to make that decision, and therefore I do not oppose, the prosecutor going after and seeking the death penalty, no matter how much it costs. It's justice, and sometimes as expensive as justice is and as slow as justice is, it must be served. And so that's my response to Jodi Arias.
Into that.
Well, he didn't attack me too badly.
It's never an attack. It's never an attack on the person. It's always about the issue, and that's an important thing in this business because, I think Tom will agree with me. You have a variety of lawyers out there who are very talented, and, it's not that lawyers are going to agree. Lawyers are advocates for their respective positions, and I think as long as we're able to justify our position with logic and good judgment, then, no one's right, no one's wrong. That's why we have such a beautiful country. We got the First Amendment, and we're able to say what we want, but in a respectful way. And, hopefully we can always agree to disagree, and we can always be civil with one another. And I think that's what good advocacy is all about, in my view.
My only problem, I shouldn't say it's my only problem, I do think what Joey is essentially saying is that legislated revenge is appropriate. And while I completely understand being sympathetic to victims' families, I mean, if I were the victim in a situation like that, I'd probably want to strangle the person myself. That would be my emotional and psychological reaction. The question is, should the state be in that business? And should public officials who are elected be in that business? I personally don't think so.
That's a great point, but that's a policy argument that's left to politicians. That's not an argument left to lawyers. If I'm an elected official within a county, I might have my own judgment. In fact, Tom, you and I ask jurors all the time, can you put aside your personal views about, what the law is? And if I tell you that the law is that if you have a 0.08 of alcohol in your system, right, and you may feel fine, but the law says that you're legally drunk, could you apply that law to this case? I'm using that as an example, of course, George. And if they say no, they get kicked off the jury. So it may be legislative revenge. It might be the worst thing in the universe.